Welcome, Gary Tomlinson. I'm excited to talk to you because you have this terrific book on discovering execution, the keys to high-performance organization. But Gary, I want to know the backstory. How did this book come about? I've already read it. It's useful. It gave me tips I could use today. But I want to know, what's the backstory on this? How did this come about?
Well, this has been a space that I have been working in since 2007. And it's on execution management and execution management systems. And in that journey, the people that I've worked with, we've learned so much that I wanted to write a book on this topic. And my writing partner, Miles Kearson, who was also a consultant around execution, he and I started writing the book together. In fact, it was titled Mastery of Execution. We wanted to write a book on taking organizations on the journey to the mastery of execution. We were about a month in the writing process when both of us got this feeling, it was kind of spooky, that we weren't writing the right book. We were telling people to master something before they even discovered it. And that's one of the things that we found out about execution, is it needs to be discovered. Mm-hmm. And that's the most amazing thing about discovering execution, is that it has to be discovered. You know, and that seems awful strange, because how can you discover something where everyone knows everything about it? Well, we need to. You know, when we talk about discovering execution, what that means to us, it means transforming a vague notion of execution as a good skill to have into realizing just how critical and radical mastering execution can be for both individuals and organizations in terms of what they can and do accomplish.
You know, it's so fascinating because I could see someone going, wait a second, everybody knows execution. Everyone understands you need to get things done. What is unique about this? And so I'd like you to talk about that, because I think that's the goal. The I'm assuming I know it is a danger point in a lot of things in life, especially in this one.
Well, an example that I guess I could use would be execution is a lot like air. You know what air is. We all know what air is. It's that mostly invisible stuff that we breathe. And although it's everywhere, there was a time not all that long ago that it didn't exist. We didn't know about it. Scientists came along and said, wait a minute. This air that we're breathing, there's something in it. There's molecules and particles. There are properties and such. And if we learned about those, we could enhance it, we could improve upon it, we could protect it. And execution is like air, and it too is everywhere. But it's mostly invisible. Mm-hmm. And it also has principles and properties. And that if we were to learn those, it would make a huge difference, because everything we do takes execution, Martin. Takes execution to put a strategy together, takes execution to communicate that strategy, takes execution to implement that strategy. Everything we do takes execution. But here's the dilemma. If everything we do does take execution, why don't we try to get better at it? Why didn't every single senior leader have execution as the number one skill set for their organizations to excel at? In fact, when are we going to discover execution? Mm-hmm. Because until we do, there's nothing to manage.
You know, I think, well, there are two things on that. One, his discovering air gave us the idea that we could compress it and then we could use it as a tool in other contexts. I mean, that's another analogy there. The other thing is, I'm just thinking maybe half the meetings that when I'm coaching executives and people in businesses, so much of the time is consumed with meetings that don't seem to lead to anything productive, that might be trimmed back quite a bit if you were discovering execution.
Oh, no question. Because if you look how it all fits together, you know, it's just, we have a vision. We have a strategy for reaching that vision. We have what we want to accomplish this year that gets us on the right track to hit that vision. But then no matter how you slice it, execution happens at an individual level.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we learn to manage execution down to that individual level?
Mm-hmm.
And so, my space is about first discovering execution. Then it's about understanding what it means to manage execution. And then from there, to understand what it means to lead through the lens of execution. None of this is taught in our business schools. It's not taught in our MBA programs, and we surely don't get to see it demonstrated very often in our organizations.
Sure. The domination of meetings that can consume in some of these companies so much of their time, to me, would show it. Where 2/3 of the people might not need to be there.
When I talked about execution being like air and it too had principles and properties, one of them, which is something that happens constantly in every organization every day, is we've coined it the execution cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And it consists of a request, a promise, and a follow-through. Now, going back to your example of the meetings, during our meetings, what if we said, okay, let's look at it from a result standpoint. Are there any requests made from this meeting? And who are they being made to? Is anybody taking that request on and saying, I promise I will get that done by such and such a time? And then who's responsible for the different follow-ups to make sure that's going to get done on time? So when you think about it, you got a request. So we should learn to become more competent as a requester.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time we're not. In fact, if I said to you, Martin, I need that report tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, okay. Well, when we do these examples, my partner has had a CEO come up and said, Miles, I need that report tomorrow by 9. And Miles go, good to know. Thanks for sharing. And the CEO looked at him and says, well, are you going to do it? And he goes, do what? Are you going to get that report to me by 9 tomorrow? He says, well, you never asked me that. You just told me what you needed.
Right.
We're often not competent as requesters.
Right.
And as a promiser, think about now, every time you say you'll do something or no problem, you should get that done. Think about that as you're making a promise.
Mm-hmm.
Because we as humans think it's wrong to break a promise.
Mm-hmm. So
now when there are things when I'm being a requester and it's something I really want to have done, and I do this with my clients all the time, from one call to the next, there can often be assignments or homework, if you will. I will say, is this something that you can have done and ready for our next call? And they said, yes. Do you promise that you will?
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten comfortable with saying, do you promise?
Mm-hmm.
Because I found out when people say, I promise, they're much more likely to follow through with it. But then I don't leave that. I'm also becoming competent as someone that can follow through. I'll send an email or a quick voicemail or a text message that says a gentle reminder that you promised to have this done at such and such a date, at such and such a time. And it's amazing how many senior execs will share with me afterwards. They'll say, Gary, I know you probably think it's silly that you got to remind somebody in my position.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to tell you, there's times that, hey, you not sent that reminder, I'd have forgot.
Mm-hmm.
And so it could be said that all of work comprises around this execution cycle. And because that does, wouldn't it make sense to get better at it?
This is excellent. I want you to just take those very components and let's review them. So where do we start? We have a meeting. We need to get something done. We've got 4 people in the meeting. Let's take those 4 people and work through the example. Our goal is a software development product.
We're going to be doing a software development product, and we're starting from scratch on it.
Yeah.
4 key people that are going to be responsible for that. I would probably start off with, first of all, what is it that we want to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
How much time do we think it might take? What's the cost going to be? What's the value proposition going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have the resources to do it and do it in a timely fashion?
Mm-hmm.
From there, we can talk about what are the critical steps that need to be done. We can list those steps. Then we can prioritize them. What order do we need to do them in? Now, often that happens all the time, meetings like that.
Yeah.
But what we don't do is, because this is going to be done by the group of 4 people.
Right.
Because execution doesn't happen at a team level. It doesn't happen at a company level. It doesn't happen at a department level. It happens at an individual level. Now, please understand, I'm not saying that teamwork's not important.
Yeah.
But teams don't do anything. The individuals of those teams do. So we need to break it down to each individual. What's their role in it? What are they going to do? What is the request that's being made of them for this? And have they promised to take that request and follow through on it?
Yeah. And I would think also, if you're part of the system, you'd probably start with yourself and you walk through. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm promising to you that I'll do it by this time. Is really gets to that servant leadership. How do you lead by example and say, I'm the first one? Okay. Yep. And you can hold me accountable for this specific action. And I think the key here is, are we getting it down to a specific measurable action that someone else walking by would be able to see it and go, yep, that was done.
And if you look at it, if you look at that 80-20 rule,
yeah,
it seems like we got thousands of things to do, but we can make it simpler than that. We can look at it and say, okay, what's the most important things that we need to be doing? That we need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't have to worry about all the other shiny objects that are trying to take our attention. Just because it's a good opportunity doesn't mean it's the right action to be taken at this time.
Mm-hmm. 2 other things show up in this process that I think is important to bring up. One, what do you do when you get together and you verify it's been done and they do it? And what do you do when you get together and verify it's not been done? Because I think you even need to address that in your work as well. And do.
The first scenario, they promised they would get something done on time, and they did.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say they couldn't quite get it done on time, but they were communicating effectively to everybody and said, I can't because of these reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And whether we liked it or not, we understood it, and it made sense. Well, for there, I think, you get the behavior you reward, and so you reward that with thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for doing what you said you were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. We're on time. Good job, everybody. Now let's go to that second example. You made a promise that you'd have this done. Your work had to be done before somebody else could complete their work.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't communicate to us that it wasn't going to be done, and you show up at the meeting and it wasn't accomplished. That's not acceptable behavior, not in this group, not
Mm-hmm.
for what we're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
So can you have that done by next week?
Mm-hmm.
And if they promise to do so, and then they don't follow through again,
Mm-hmm.
then I more than likely would replace them.
Mm-hmm. Got it. The key thing you said is, if they didn't do it and they didn't communicate that there's a breakdown occurring. I think that's the key thing. You got it. Versus, and now I want to talk about the person who clearly communicated, my gosh, I didn't realize that we don't even have the right version of the software to write the code halfway through the thing. And I am not going to make my deadline. And I like to, how do you handle that? Because you've gotten I think the other situations addressed well.
Well, there's in the book, Good to Great,
Mm-hmm.
Jim Collins gave one of the chapters talked about the Stockdale Paradox.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't get into the story, but it came down to this. You have to confront the brutal facts of reality.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you have to have this unwavering faith that you will prevail.
Mm-hmm.
So in something like this, we didn't like the news that we were hearing that I can't get this done by the meeting because we don't have the right software to write the code
Mm-hmm.
for the project that we're on. Well, that's the brutal facts of reality.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, that's going to throw us back a little bit, but we're still going to prevail. We're still going to get it done. And maybe we can cut something else down or work a little bit longer or a weekend or two just to catch back up.
So you would probably, first of all, it sounds like you'd appreciate you being in communication. We didn't get it done. And then what is the promise? What do we need to do to make it happen?
Yes.
Right?
Because it's all about the Heath brothers in the book Switch. About change is hard. They said the paralyzing part of change is in the critical steps. Well, that's true of execution. The paralyzing part of execution is in the critical steps. This is something I'm learning more and more as I work with organizations. We can do a great job of telling people what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, what we need from them, and then let them go and say, go do it. Because we surely don't want to be accused of micromanaging.
Right.
But what happens is often the people doing the work aren't quite sure of the critical steps that are needed to accomplish that, to get the results from that project they're doing that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's human nature not to tattle on yourself and say, I really don't know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And no manager has been involved helping that person that reports to them, or the team leader in this particular case, of saying, how are you coming with that? How are you doing? Any issues, any roadblocks, anything I can help with?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a failure not knowing how to do something. Because there's a lot of things we don't know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
The failure is not, first of all, not admitting it. 2, not asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
And 3, not communicating it effectively soon enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And also clearly is a new training of a standard to operate out of in a business that takes case studies of all those happening. So people go, this guy's serious about it. This leadership's serious. We're going to get recognition if we get it on time. We're going to get positive recognition if we communicate with the plan to recorrect. And we're going to get negative reinforcement if we actually just don't do it. There's nowhere to hide. It's like you're pinning it down where you're making it transparent so there's nowhere to hide for them or you. That's the ultimate in execution then.
It is, and I'm smiling because an author, Randy Pennington, wrote a book called Results Rule.
Mm-hmm.
And they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How well we communicate, how well we execute,
mm-hmm.
whether we do it or don't do it, or how well we do it or don't do it, and it makes all the difference in terms of outcomes, in terms of results. What if we got on a journey to master execution? And mastery is, another word for mastery is practice.
Mm-hmm.
What if we practice getting better at it?
Mm-hmm.
Practice getting better at requesting, at promising, at follow through, of helping understand how all this fits together. Who's going to do what by when? And does everybody understand the critical steps to be successful in accomplishing their part?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty simple, not easy.
Right.
Pretty simple.
Right. And clearly could transform an organization.
Oh, no question.
Excellent. Several things. Where would you recommend someone start in it? Of course, I'm going to say buy your book and read it. And then, but where's the beginnings place?
I would, with all modesty aside,
mm-hmm.
I would recommend the first step is in reading Discovering Execution. It's not a typical manual. It's more about speaking to the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And giving and sharing these thoughts for them to say, you know what, that makes sense. Because the very first step is discovering execution.
Mm-hmm.
And the prerequisites for that are, 1, would you be willing, just willing to have this thought that maybe everything you know about execution is not everything you need to know.
I just want to add something. I think the most powerful thing for me in life is my commitment to embrace when I'm wrong. It doesn't mean I enjoy it, but embrace when I'm wrong, because that's a doorway for opening things up, and also keep exploring things I assume I know. Do I really know them? And I think that's what you're talking about here.
And you used a key word. You used the word commitment.
Yeah.
And commitment is a key principle, a key property of execution. And it's something us human beings are not always really good at.
Right.
And nothing extraordinary has ever happened without someone first being committed.
Yeah.
And that commitment, when I think of it, a great example, now for people my age, you'll get this, but President Kennedy.
Yeah.
He made a commitment to the United States and to the world that by the end of the decade, we will have taken a spaceship to the moon, landed it safely with a human on it, and bring it back to Earth safely.
Yeah.
Well, when he made this, people were going, "Oh, whoa, this is amazing." He had scientists come up to him and say, "Now, Mr. President, with all due respect, that's impossible."
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "We don't even have the fuel to do something like that."
Mm-hmm.
To which President Kennedy said, "That's okay, go invent it."
Mm-hmm.
Being committed doesn't mean you know how to do it.
Right.
In fact, often it might mean you don't.
Right.
But what it does mean is I am committed to achieving this, to finding out how to do it.
I'm going to end on something I really believe is true and work hard to remember. The people who don't succeed are hoping, wishing, and the people who do are just asking the question, what does it take? What does it take? What does it take? And then they may hit the wall enough to decide, okay, I know what it takes. I'm not willing to invest the effort to make it happen. That's different, right?
That's going through that process.
Yeah.
And what you just described made me think of hopium is not a strategy.
Right. I love that. Hopium is a strategy. It's a drug, actually.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I hope it'll work. I hope this will happen. I hope this.
Yeah.
Hopium is not a commitment.
Yeah. And the last piece I want to reiterate here is that the thing I love about commitment is the freedom it gives you. And that's people don't realize, the freedom of I'm committed to doing this means I don't have to check in on my moment-to-moment feelings on the process of it. But they're going to go like this.
And when others know that you come through on your commitments,
yeah.
Oh man, what that speaks about you. It speaks volumes. You become known as a person that can come through for others.
Yeah. I do need to give a shout out for our good friend Steve Han, which I hope to interview too soon, of B&I. You and I know, talk about a model of if he gives his word, we know it's going into a ledger sheet and going to be executed. And we've seen it over and over again. And that's one of the reasons I love the guy is I'm careful of what I ask of him because it will happen. There aren't many people you can say, I'm worried of asking it because it will actually occur,
When Steve says I'll do something, it's like he has made a promise to you.
Yeah.
The other is that he's disciplined enough to use a system, which would be calling an execution management system, that allows him a better opportunity to always follow through on his promises.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. How can they learn more about you? This was fantastic. Again, I'm going to say just buy the book. The other thing that I want to just tell you,
shameless marketing here. I'll hold up a copy of the book. This
Excellent.
is you can get this at Amazon.
Yep.
Makes a great read. You can reach me at go to my website at GaryETomlinson.com. GARY is an Edward. TOMLINSON.com, or send me an email at GaryETomlinson.com.
I do want to mention it's also available in Kindle, which is really important to understand.
Yes.
because that means you can go and download it immediately. And I just looked up on my Kindle on the sharing system I pay for it. I can get it free. Now, I've already bought the book and gone through with it. I want to do it. And I do want to tell you I'm a little more challenged in reading, and I want to thank you. Your book is text-to-speech enabled. So if they have a Kindle, they can actually listen to it, and if they have a Amazon Alexa system, they can listen to it. So I just
wonderful.
add that as well, and I'll show you how to do that sometime too. I love being your tech go-to guy. You know,
yeah,
makes me feel important.
Well, but it is you mix no words. Gary, don't think. Get a pencil out, write these 3 steps out, do them.
And buy this recorder.
And I get the results I'm looking for. So thank you.
It's excellent. Great. Well, thanks, Gary. This was just fantastic. I look forward to hearing people's comments on it. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.